Welcome back to Speak English Naturally. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Laura. Today we're recording from the lobby of a modern bank. We had a couple of things to take care of this morning, and while we were waiting, we realized this might be the perfect place for today's conversation.
It really is. Everyone around us seems completely focused. Some people are talking to bank advisors, others are waiting for their number, and a few are probably wondering why the line always moves faster on the other side.
That's true. And it's funny because banks have a way of making everyone look just a little more serious. Even people who walk in smiling somehow leave the entrance looking like they're about to solve a very important problem.
Maybe that's because money has that effect on us. The moment someone mentions salaries, savings, or budgets, the conversation suddenly feels more complicated than it really is.
And something very similar happens with English. Many learners are perfectly comfortable talking about food, travel, or hobbies, but the moment the topic becomes money, they immediately think, I don't know enough English for this.
Exactly. It's almost like they imagine every money conversation sounds like a meeting between accountants.
When in reality, most of them sound like this. How much is it? Can I pay by card? I'm trying to save some money. That's a little expensive.
Those are the conversations we actually have every day. Nobody walks into a coffee shop and says, I'd like to discuss my long-term financial strategy before ordering a cappuccino.
I would probably leave if someone did that.
Me too. I'd pretend I suddenly remembered another appointment.
The interesting thing is that people don't usually struggle because the vocabulary is difficult. They struggle because money feels personal. Nobody wants to misunderstand the price of something or make a mistake while talking about payments.
That's a great point. I still remember the first time I had to visit a bank while traveling. I spent almost an hour reviewing banking vocabulary the night before, because I thought I would need every financial word I'd ever learned.
Let me guess, the conversation lasted about 3 minutes.
Less than that. The woman smiled, asked how she could help me. I said I wanted to open a bank account. She handed me a form, and that was basically it. I walked out thinking, I can't believe I spent an hour preparing for 5 simple sentences.
Laura, I think we've all had moments like that. We prepare for the conversation we imagine instead of the conversation that actually happens.
You know what else I've noticed? We often use the word expensive without really thinking about it. Someone buys a cup of coffee and immediately says, wow, that's expensive. But 5 minutes later, they happily spend twice as much on something they really wanted.
That's because expensive isn't always about the price. Sometimes it's about how much value we think we're getting. I've seen people pay a lot for concert tickets without complaining, then spend the next week talking about how overpriced lunch was.
That's so true. I have a friend who never hesitates to buy the latest phone, but if parking costs $5, he acts like he's been personally betrayed.
We all have something like that. Money is emotional. Two people can look at exactly the same price and have completely different reactions.
Which is why I like the expression, it's worth it. It completely changes the conversation. Instead of focusing only on the price, you're talking about value.
Exactly. You might say, the hotel was expensive, but it was worth it. Or the course wasn't cheap, but it was definitely worth it. Those are expressions people hear all the time in everyday English.
And they're much more natural than trying to sound overly formal. Nobody says, the financial investment produced satisfactory value for my expectations.
I hope nobody says that while ordering lunch.
Imagine someone looking at the menu and saying, I'd like to evaluate the cost-benefit relationship of this sandwich.
They'd probably miss lunch because everyone else would already be eating.
Speaking of lunch, that's actually where a lot of money conversations happen. You're out with friends, the bill arrives, and suddenly someone asks, should we split it? That's not a financial meeting. It's just everyday life.
Or someone says, I've got this one, and everyone immediately starts arguing about who pays. I think every group of friends in the world has had that conversation at least once.
Definitely. Sometimes the argument lasts longer than the meal.
And the English is always simple. It's on me. Let's split the bill. I'll pay next time. Don't worry about it. None of those expressions are difficult, but they're incredibly useful because they happen in real conversations.
That's something I wish more learners realized. The English you need around money isn't hidden inside a finance textbook. It's already part of everyday life. You hear it in cafes, restaurants, stores, airports, and even here in a bank.
I think that's why confidence grows so quickly once people stop treating money as a special topic. The moment you realize you're just talking about buying coffee, paying a bill, saving for a vacation, or comparing prices, everything becomes much more relaxed.
And once you're relaxed, something interesting happens. You stop searching for the perfect word and start paying attention to the conversation instead.
Which, ironically, is when your English usually sounds its most natural.
You know, one expression I hear all the time is, I'm trying to save money. It's such a simple sentence, but people use it for everything. They say it when they skip dessert, when they decide not to buy new clothes, or when they stay home instead of going out for dinner.
I use that expression all the time. The funny thing is that trying does a lot of work in that sentence. It doesn't mean you're saving money perfectly. It just means you're making an effort. And I think that's something everyone can relate to.
Absolutely. Nobody wakes up one day and suddenly becomes perfect with money. One week you're saving, the next week your car needs repairs, your phone stops working, or you get invited to 3 birthday dinners in the same weekend.
Life has perfect timing for unexpected expenses.
It really does. You finally feel like you're making progress. And then something happens that reminds you why people call them unexpected.
That's another useful expression, by the way. Unexpected expenses. You'll hear native speakers use it all the time because everyone experiences them sooner or later.
I remember saving for a vacation once. I was feeling very responsible. Every month, I put a little money aside, and I was actually proud of myself. Then one morning, my car decided it had completely different plans.
Let me guess. The vacation fund became the repair fund.
Exactly. I remember looking at the mechanic's estimate and thinking, well, I guess I'm taking a trip to the repair shop instead.
At least it's a destination nobody plans to visit.
That's true. But those situations also teach you another expression people use constantly. I can't afford it right now.
And that's an important one because it doesn't necessarily mean something is too expensive forever. It simply means it isn't the right time financially.
Exactly. Sometimes people think saying, I can't afford it, sounds negative. But it's actually a very responsible decision. We all have things we'd like to buy. The difficult part is deciding whether today is the right day.
That's why I like the phrase, maybe later. It's optimistic without creating pressure. You're not saying no forever, you're just saying not today.
I think that's true for learning English too.
Laura, how so?
Well, people often tell themselves, I'll start speaking English when I know more vocabulary. But confidence works the opposite way. You gain vocabulary by speaking, not by waiting.
That's such a good comparison. With money, waiting sometimes makes sense because you're saving toward a goal. With speaking, waiting usually delays the very thing that helps you improve.
Exactly. If someone asked you right now,
You could say, yes, I'm saving for a trip, or not really, I've been spending too much lately, or even, I'm trying, but it's not easy,
those sound like real conversations.
because they are. Nobody expects a perfect answer, they just expect an honest one.
And honest answers are usually the easiest ones to remember because they're true.
You know what I find interesting? People often say money can't buy happiness. And while I understand the idea, I also think the conversation is a little more complicated than that.
I agree. Money probably can't buy happiness directly, but it can certainly reduce a lot of stress. If your rent is paid, your bills are covered, and you don't have to worry every single day, life feels very different.
Exactly. That's why I don't like treating money as something people shouldn't talk about. It's part of everyday life. We work for it, we save it, we spend it, and sometimes we worry about it. There's nothing strange about having those conversations.
I think that's changing, though. More people are becoming comfortable talking about budgets, saving, and financial goals. Not because they're obsessed with money, but because they're trying to make smarter decisions.
And those conversations happen between friends all the time. Someone says, I'm saving for a house. Another person says, we're planning a big trip next year. Before you know it, everyone is sharing ideas and experiences.
Speaking of houses, that's one purchase that really changes the way people think about money.
Definitely. Suddenly, phrases like monthly payment, down payment, and interest rate become part of your everyday vocabulary.
And even then, the conversations stay surprisingly simple. People don't usually explain the entire mortgage process. They just say, we're thinking about buying a house, or we're still saving for the down payment.
That's something learners sometimes forget. Real conversations are usually much simpler than textbooks make them seem.
Exactly. Textbooks love giving you long dialogues, where two people discuss every possible detail. Real life is much shorter. Someone asks, are you renting or do you own your home? You answer, and the conversation moves on.
Just like travel. Someone asks, how was your vacation? They don't expect a 40-minute documentary.
Unless you're looking at vacation photos.
That's true. Then suddenly every meal deserves its own presentation.
And this was breakfast on Tuesday.
Please notice how the toast was slightly darker than Monday's.
Exactly.
But that's actually another lesson about conversation. People don't remember every word you use. They remember whether the conversation felt enjoyable.
That's one of my favorite things about speaking English. Communication isn't a vocabulary competition. Nobody gives you points for using the longest word in the room.
Sometimes the simplest sentence is the most effective one.
Like, I'm saving for something special.
Or, it's a little outside my budget.
Or even, I'll think about it.
That's another expression people use constantly when they're shopping. Sometimes it means, I genuinely need more time.
And sometimes,
It politely means, I'm definitely not buying this today.
exactly. Salespeople around the world understand that translation immediately.
They probably hear it 20 times a day.
And that's what makes today's topic so interesting. We've spent all this time talking about money. Yet almost every expression we've used has been simple, natural, and something you could probably start using today.
Which proves our point from the beginning. The difficult part isn't the English, it's believing you're ready to use it.
Then once you stop waiting for perfect English, something wonderful happens. You start having real conversations, one simple sentence at a time.
And that's exactly how confidence grows.
Thanks for spending a little time with us today.
We hope this conversation helps you feel a little more comfortable talking about money in English. Not because you memorized a long list of vocabulary, but because you realize that everyday conversations are usually much simpler than we imagine.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep speaking, keep listening, and most importantly,
Keep enjoying the conversation.
bye everyone.